we're going to talk about in this panel. And joining me are Keri Drengler. She is the Managing Director of Digital at M6. Also Freddie Liversidge, he's the Global Director of Digital Activation at HP. And Andrew Ronnfeldt, the Manager of Digital Marketing, Paid Social and Display at Sprint. So welcome everyone. Keri, I see you here.
Thanks for having us, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. And there's Freddie. Just need Andrew. Great. And we have everyone on board here. Well, thanks again, guys. I really appreciate you guys being here and sharing with us your insights. And let's just get right to it as far as how are you meeting the challenges of this cookieless world? I mean, is there anything specific that you can discuss that you've had to deal with, especially over these last few months? Keri, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of what we've been doing for the clients and the brands that we work with is really thinking about how do we prepare for this, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to understanding what a lot of the vendors are doing in the space. What are the tech vendors doing? What are our publishers doing? What can we as individual agencies and agency holding companies do to prepare for this, right? I think it's starting. It hasn't sort of rolled out sort of full force just yet. But I think there's a lot that we need to do to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for when this becomes even more of a widespread change. How do we prepare for that? So a lot of conversations have been happening, planning, utilizing a lot of the data that we have access to, either with our clients, whether we have as part of our larger holding company, and developing the solutions that will enable us to pivot quickly.
And Freddie, what's going on at HP? What have you guys been up to?
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what Keri said. It's about it's kind of working out where we want to approach it, right? When we first had the announcement, we kind of went into the freak out maneuver, right? Which is the third-party cookies dying, and there's all this regulation coming in. What are we going to do? Because HP has built our whole strategy for the last 2 or 3 years around audience-based targeting and audience-based measurements. How do we move forward? And then now we're just kind of into that move of what do we do? And so it's working exactly with the partners to understand how do we build into these walled gardens and understanding what's happening around the ecosystem. I think we're going to talk about that in a bit longer, right, with regards to the sandboxes and so forth and other solutions that maybe could be industry-wide. But really what we're focusing on right now is how do we continue to do what we have found so successful the last 2-3 years, but within these new regulations.
Are you coming up with anything specifically that's working for you?
Specifically, it's a tough one to answer because we're still just playing around. I mean, I think I keep proving out and showcasing where the cookie is crumbling. I think that, I guess, from a negative point of view, which is kind of fun. So, for example, just the quality of our data. Like, we're just looking at things such as the landings that we are seeing. Like, our bounce rate's getting higher and higher and higher, and the same media working. So we know that the cookie is just not as stable as it used to be. We also are seeing like the quality of our third-party data. We're running quite a lot of testing on quality of third-party data that we're using and seeing that diminish in quality. We ran some stats around kind of like, if I target a demographic of a male, what is the likelihood of me targeting a male? And it's getting down to the point now for us where it's nearly as accurate as just targeting the US, right? It's 50% chance of hitting a male if I use data, or I could just target the US and there's about 50% chance of hitting a male, for example. And so we're starting to see the degeneration, I guess, or some of the quality of the data fall apart. But with regards to can I show you anything that we've proven out yet? No, because I think we're still just playing around trying to work out exactly what we do with each of these vendors. And which walled garden do we get most friendly with at the moment?
And Andrew, what about you on your side?
Yeah, I think we're experiencing some of the same challenges that Freddie mentioned from an exclusion perspective, especially for prospecting campaigns. When trying to exclude our T-Mobile Sprint base, we're still seeing about 30% of our ads going towards existing customers, and that's just speaking to the degradation of the cookie that we've seen over the last year or two.
Well, now, and which was, I think, brought up earlier, is this a little bit of a hype? You know, I mean, after all, there will be still first-party cookies. So is this kind of an extreme kind of headline topic? And we can go back to you, Keri, for that.
It's an interesting question. Yes and no, and I think Freddie touched on it quite a bit. Is it's what I'm sort of seeing is it's going to limit who we can work with, right? We have to work. I think this change is sort of shifting us to working with a lot of those walled gardens in more exclusive capacities, and I think that's going to be the biggest change for us. Is how can we make sure that we're still able to do what we're used to doing, right? Which is very, very finite audience targeting and being able to segment our audiences in that capacity. It just sort of changes the variety of offerings that we have at our fingertips, as well as the ability to control how much data we have access to, knowing that a lot of that data will be controlled by the juggernauts. And how do we, as agency partners, help to guide the brands and the clients that we work with through that process, and how do we support in developing those sort of long-term relationships that will be required. So is it hype? No, I don't think so. I think we really need to be thoughtful about how can we use first-party data in a better way? How can we find the vendors that have the best plans of attack for dealing with this, and prepare ourselves to make those adjustments as we begin to see cookies degrade to an even further extent.
Well, so now coming off of what Keri was just saying, Freddie, tell me, like, how are you dealing with it in terms of vetting these partners and being able to get this data that you can actually trust? Have you put anything into place at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, the big partners, right? I mean, what I think we're seeing come up is this these safe rooms or safe havens, or I've heard a lot of different industry names for them, right? Starting to show up from a data point of view. So Google's got Ads Data Hub, Amazon's got Amazon Marketing Cloud they're releasing. I'm waiting for the Facebook announcement, probably next week. I don't know when it's going to actually come, but I'm sure they've got a safe haven, and you're seeing Xandr and all the other big kind of partners build them. And so we've started to really play into those spaces, and in a way, I actually I can see the power of what they will become. Again, as a pure kind of media programmatic guy who's grown up, and I hate the fact that now I need to go to 10 different partners to get the data. But the data inside, when I go into Ads Data Hub, which we've been starting to play with, it's one, more deterministic than if we've ever really been able to get our hands on before, except if you're playing in the Facebook ecosystem or one of the other walled gardens. It's the ability to then start to run analysis and share information with other partners, like we might have done with a DMP in the past, is there. Like, it actually, for me, is actually quite exciting for what the future looks like. I mean, one of the areas that, from an HP point of view, we have a massive issue with is we don't own the point of sale for 90% plus of our products, right? You go to Best Buy to buy an HP printer, or you go to, actually go to Office Depot usually, and then you go to HP, you go to Best Buy to buy a PC. Well, now we have an ability to start to share data, to understand that in a privacy safe way. And I think we've tried to do that with DMPs in the past and haven't been able to do it. And now we can start to see that. So to your question, I think that these safe rooms that are being created, we've started to see like some of the benefits to it of what we are. And again, I still don't like the fact that I can't do it across one and tell you. But I literally actually just said to our my CMO is like, look, if you want reach and frequency, I can now tell you 3 numbers. I'll tell you what it's on Google. I'll tell you what it's on Amazon. I'll tell you what it's on Facebook. I won't tell you, I can't give you one number. And that's just going to be the way it kind of is moving forwards, unless you use a panel solution, right, to kind of get an estimate.
Well, and that sort of goes to another question for Andrew. With this, really, that it's not that compatible metric in terms of measurement. How are you guys at Sprint moving forward with that? Are you trusting these safe havens as Freddie was talking about, or are you trying to create your own? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of effort and time put into trying to build out a clean data lake and really owning all the data and having it sourced into internal systems so that we can have an internal team who is analyzing the data and providing lift and A/B testing. From a future-looking perspective, though, I think the future is really continuing, like Freddie mentioned, continuing to lean into the partnerships with the walled gardens. So there's been kind of a priority to be hesitant around working with third parties and trying to own everything in-house. And I think in order to take the most advantage of the data, using things like Ads Data Hub or Amazon Cloud, those really provide so much more added value than what we can do internally. So it's a balancing act between those.
Yeah, just to jump on that one, sorry, Lisa.
Okay, good.
But I just think it's to your point, Andrew. I remember when this announcement we started sharing out to HP about the death of the cookie and all this. I remember getting a note kind of saying, "Is the data lake work we've been doing for the last 3 years a waste of time?" And my point of view on it is, no, it's not. Well, at least now we have our data in the right place in one location, because that wasn't possible before, and honestly I don't think ours is quite in one location yet, but it's getting better. But now we can take it and then bump it up against all the platforms we need to get the insights, which I think is really interesting, as kind of Andrew was saying. So we kind of end up playing, we still need that centralization of all of our own personal data, right, the HP owned, and then we can now bump it up and enrich it with whichever walled garden we're working with at that time.
Well, and speaking to that, are these challenges, are they making you maybe better? Or maybe, maybe it's forcing you to create something that's even better than what was before. And let's start with you, Keri, for that.
I think in some cases, yes. I think is sort of my initial thought, right? We can get down, I think it forces us as marketers to get down to a better place when we think about identity resolution. How can we make sure that we're actually communicating with the right people? I definitely think it poses some challenges, but I think it does give us an opportunity to stop, take a step back, assess what we've been doing from a third-party data perspective, and reassess and see if there are opportunities out there that make us even stronger and even more targeted in speaking and communicating with the right people at the right time. I think, so yes, I do think it makes it better in some cases. I think on the flip side though, I think where the challenge lies is that, again, we're sort of forced to work with a much smaller group. And I think because of that, it creates less sort of newcomers and competitions in the data space. And I see that as a loss, to be frank, for the industry as a whole. Sort of new ways of thinking about data and new ways of thinking about people. We're sort of reliant on a handful of large vendors to help us determine or to help give us solutions on ways to target people. And I see there as benefits, and I also see there as potential downfalls, which is that fresh, new, competitive style thinking that's sort of driven this industry for such a long time.
And I want to, before I ask this last question, I want to remind everyone that if you do have a question for any of these guys, please just raise your hand. Steve will send you an unmute button and then you can ask them. But I do want to find out, just in terms of your overall strategy, your overall data strategy, how has it impacted and what are you doing as a result of that? What are you doing to sort of, reach those challenges or, face those challenges? And let's start with you, Andrew, for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, the walled garden is a big piece. So leaning into those relationships and making sure that the reporting that is being offered that is being taken advantage of, but I think also using a system like LiveRamp, so like Identity Link and some of the products that they offer as a third party, which kind of equally benefits the publishers and the marketers, and allows for that third party indifferent identifier. And I think truly it's less of a fear aspect to the question earlier. It's more of an encouraging. It could result in even better tracking long term if there is a unified solution that's adopted.
Freddie, for you?
I look at it into, just quickly, I'll come to the data strategy. I think the other part that I like about the change a little bit to the reset point of view is around the consumer, right? I love all the data we have and so forth, but I do get fed up when I get chased around the internet for 30 days with a pair of shoes, right? Like that just drives me nuts after I've already bought them. I make the joke where I got married a few months ago and I still get wedding stuff come through to me, which is useless as anything. So, like that, that I'm really excited about that change. And I think so for us, when it comes to the data strategy, it does need to change. And it's going to fundamentally change the way we are. Will we go more first party, more for us personally, telemetry, email based focused, and then more of a secure upload versus kind of like the cookie based retargeting off of a web page? I think that's probably what we will end up doing. So if anything, we're going to use more stronger, that's not the right English, but like better signals to be able to target people, which I think is a good thing. I also think that hopefully through this, and what we're kind of challenging ourselves internally is, can we kind of find a better balance between that creepy to beneficial factor of utilizing data to talk to people? Like we know, right, I think Forrester puts out a publication once a year basically telling us that digital advertising is creepy. And so I think, how do we make it better through this change to be less creepy? I mean, it's kind of what I'm looking at it from.
And with Keri, with your clients, what are you finding? Is it similar to what they're seeing, or is it sort of different depending on who the client is?
I would say some of it is very comparable to what they're saying, but I also think we are very conscious about tailoring solutions for each of our individual client needs. So it's finding what identity resolution partner makes the most sense for you, what DMP makes the most sense for each of our individual clients. How can we look at which vendors we should be partnering with? Do we want to go, what type of measurement do we need to have in place? And I think it needs to be customized down to the individual needs of each of our brands. And I think that's the critical piece, is sort of understanding what everyone in the space is doing to prepare for this, and how can we then sort of piece together the best solution that meets the needs of any of our clients. And that's really what we're focused on, is that piece of it, as well as what can we do? I mean, most of us are part of, on the agency side, part of large holding companies. When we think about what all of our sister agencies have and can bring to the table, can we help produce solutions and produce opportunities to support the brands that we work with based on all of the data that we have as marketers and within our holding companies?
Yeah, I mean, is there that possibility to sort of you guys band together and kind of share this information so you can take back some of the control?
I don't necessarily think it's about control per se. I think it's more about building best-in-class solutions for each of our clients. And if we have something that we can offer that would help solve one of our brand's problems, let's do it. Let's pull together. Like let's be part of the solution, as opposed to just sort of pathways for information. How can we help be forward thinking? How can we use all of the talent within the database managers that we have, and the business insights and the marketing intelligence? How can we pull those resources together to help build prospective solutions? So outside of just helping to negotiate with the walled gardens and helping to sort of build the best tech stacks to meet all of the needs, what can we do to start being proactive in developing prospective solutions?
Steve, you have any questions?
We have several, so guys, buckle up. So here's and some from some old friends of ours. Scott Bender from Prohaska.
Hi, Steve. Thank you, and great panel. This question's for Andrew, but really I'll throw it to everybody. And that is, Andrew, you referenced, I guess, your use of a data lake. I'd love for you or the others just to dig a little bit deeper on just unifying technologies, understanding that the need and the reliance on the walled gardens isn't going away anytime soon. How are you thinking about understanding the internal constraints that you guys have of, other unifying technologies beyond the DMP, whether it's CDPs or other solutions, kind of, for you to develop your own, identity graph that can be leveraged against the walled gardens, or just have something, in terms of being able to leverage other parts of the web?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a tough one, because there's a balance between best practice, so having a single user profile from an analytics perspective, and then actually flipping over kind of the activation and execution of media. Sometimes it's better to actually not run everything through a single unified, like Adobe ID, for example. And so I think for testing, for A/B testing, it's important to have all tracking through a single data lake and identifying a single user, so that we can have clean test and control. But then when we're talking about exclusion, for example, porting data directly from LiveRamp into the trade desk as an example has better match rates, so it just allows for more clean activation of media.
Yeah, I think one other thing I'd say, just Scott, on top of it, we've had a challenge, and I don't have a beautiful answer for you, but is the bit around when you think about some of these safe havens, right? The ads data hubs and the AMCs of the world. To use Amazon's marketing cloud, you need to use Amazon Redshift and Amazon Cloud environment to run that. And same with Google's ads data hub, you need to use Google's environment. So we've been trying to work out is just even where do we host this data? And a lot of the time, honestly, at HP, we've decided to put it in Amazon because a lot of our last systems are in Amazon. So it just made sense to hold it in Amazon. But when we try to start to centralize this, we've been looking at it from that point of view versus we do have a DMP that we still utilize, but it's like we actually need the raw data held in these environments. Otherwise, we can't bang it against these new safe havens that are being created.
And we have a question from Dan Williams from 3 Day Blinds. Dan, you there?
I am. So I've never been a fan of cookies. They've always been kind of dumb. And except for retargeting, which is, you know, very effective, there's so many better ways to gather data, use data from a business perspective and a consumer perspective. And I feel a lot of people are worried about pixels going away and that sort of thing. I'm fairly excited for it, and I think it's going to make us better marketers. So I'm just wondering if I'm alone in that.
Freddie?
Yeah, I don't think you're alone. As I said, I think it's good for the consumer, to be brutally honest. I think some of the creepy stuff we've done with cookies and some of the random things that people get advertised because a cookie is not necessarily always accurate, right? Or quite often not accurate. I think it is. I think you are right. I think it is a benefit. Though I do think there's some bigger negatives, especially when you think about like programmatic media and like DSP-based buying. That worries me just due to the way that they cookie sync to actually be able to buy anything, right? If like the retargeting piece you talk about, but that becomes quite problematic. The other piece that for me, where the cookie is dying, is the thought of going back to a post-click or not even post-click, but post-session attribution-based model is honestly, from my business, is petrifying because people don't sadly click and then buy a $2,000 PC. Well, I'm sure there's a couple out there, but not many. And so that losing that attribution model is concerning to me on how we start to continue to show the effectiveness of our media. And there's going to be solutions that are created right in the walled gardens and so forth. There is, but that for me was probably my first and kind of continued. How do I get my holistic ROI number for my media marketing and marketing?
I agree. I think there's a lot of benefits to us sort of rethinking how we're doing things and how can we get rid of the creep factor. I think that's really valid. Measurement, I completely agree. When we think about that is the one piece that I'm not sure that we've cracked yet. I don't love the idea of the walled gardens sort of running the media, owning the data, and then sort of checking their own homework. I think that's the piece that I think makes us a little worried. One of the things that we always strive to do is make sure that we have the appropriate checks and balances, right? So that we can have someone run the media and someone else tell us if it was effective with no skin in the game. That's sort of one piece that I think we all need to really figure out is what's the right way to prove the effectiveness and the efficacy of anything that we're doing. And Freddie, no one, just as someone who works with a ton of brands, no one clicks and buys anything these days. So it's all sort of through this view-through conversion. And without that, getting that attribution becomes a real challenge. Not just for $2,000 PCs, it's sort of everything.
I have a quick lightning round wrap question for you guys because it came up yesterday in the round table. Other than sweepstakes, newsletter, coupons, when you're obviously everybody wants to build that first party data trove. What has surprised you or been the most effective, new and different way of actually getting people to give up their identity for you?
I mean, I'm happy to take this one first. One of the things that we found is if you're providing value, people are much more apt to say, okay, I'll give you this if you give me that. And that's one of the things that we found with a lot of the brands that we work with is if there is a value exchange, then you start to balance, am I willing to give my name, email address, whatever it is that we're looking for to actually get something in return? And that's something, not exactly a sweepstakes, but it's that value exchange that if we're providing enough value, someone is willing to share information to get that value. That's what we've seen that's been most successful.
Yeah, and I guess I can give a little bit of a glimpse of some of the stuff we're thinking about here. This is where we start to, I don't want to say wave, but like the idea around our warranties and things like that, right? If we give you a bit of a discount on our warranty or on our HP Care, like the Apple Care kind of approach, would you be more interested in giving up data to us? That is exactly to that kind of sweepstake. That's what we're thinking about. We're not pulling the trigger, and I'm kind of probably sharing more than I probably should, but that's what we're starting to play with and think about as a solution.
All right.
Yeah, we're kind of lucky in that sense because from a telco perspective, I mean, phone number is a requirement for every customer. So it definitely helps.
You have our number.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick it back over to Lisa. Thanks, everybody.
All right, well, thanks, Steve, and thank you guys. This was great. Obviously, a lot of people have questions about it, and I think it's going to be a continuing discussion throughout, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time and being with us today.
Thank you guys for having us.
Cheers all.
Bye, all.